From Elon Musk, who's been accused by his own employees of workplace discrimination, to Bill Ackman, whose crusade against diversity programs sparked major backlash, and Donna Hearn, who was caught pulling a gun while hurling racial slurs. In this video, we're breaking down billionaires who've been exposed for racist behavior. Elon Musk. The allegations and documented instances of racism connected to Elon Musk are both numerous and deeply troubling, spanning from workplace discrimination at his companies to his personal conduct on social media. Let's start with what's been happening at Tesla's Fremont factory in California, where multiple workers have come forward with harrowing accounts of racial harassment. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sued Tesla in 2023 for what they described as pervasive racial harassment and retaliation against black employees. This wasn't a minor complaint. This was a federal agency taking action after investigating allegations of what they termed open hostility and racism within Tesla's workplace. Workers reported experiencing and witnessing the use of racial slurs, including the N-word, being directed at black employees. They described seeing racist graffiti scrawled throughout the facility and racist images displayed openly. Imagine going to work every day and being confronted with that level of hostility and hatred. But the EEOC lawsuit was far from the only legal action Tesla has faced. In 2025, Tesla settled a lawsuit with a black female employee who made the shocking claim that a manager would actually greet workers with racial slurs. Think about that for a moment. A manager, someone in a position of authority, allegedly using the most offensive racial epithets as a form of greeting. The fact that Tesla chose to settle this case speaks volumes about what they might have wanted to avoid in a public trial. Another settlement came in 2024, this one addressing severe racial bias claims brought by a black former worker. This case had previously resulted in a jury awarding the plaintiff $3 million, though that verdict was later appealed. The pattern here is undeniable. Multiple black employees, multiple lawsuits, multiple settlements. This isn't about one disgruntled employee or one isolated incident. This is about a systemic problem within one of the world's most celebrated tech companies. Now let's talk about Musk's personal conduct, particularly on X, the platform he acquired and transformed. Since taking over Twitter and rebranding it as X, Musk has faced intense criticism for what many observers describe as amplifying racist content. He's been accused of retweeting claims about racial IQ differences, pseudoscientific racist theories that have been thoroughly debunked by legitimate researchers but continue to circulate in far-right circles. Under his ownership, researchers have documented that hate speech on the platform has surged, with racist, anti-Semitic, and other forms of bigoted content becoming far more prevalent. In 2025, he accused South Africa's government of committing genocide against white farmers. Scotland's former First Minister Humza Yousaf directly accused Musk in 2025 of inflaming racial tensions through his platform and his public statements. While Musk's racism manifests through workplace culture and social media amplification, our next billionaire took a more direct approach, launching a calculated public crusade against diversity itself. Bill Ackman. Ackman runs Pershing Square Capital Management and has made billions through high-stakes investment strategies. But in recent years, he's become perhaps more famous or infamous for his very public campaign against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The controversy really exploded following the resignation of Claudine Gay, Harvard University's first black president in 2024. Ackman was one of the most vocal figures calling for her ouster, launching a relentless campaign that accused her of plagiarism and failing to adequately address anti-Semitism on campus. But critics of Ackman argued that his crusade was motivated by something else entirely: racism. After Gay's resignation, Ackman published a 4,000-word essay in which he described DEI as inherently a racist and illegal movement. Read that again. He called diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which are designed to address historical discrimination and create more equal opportunities, inherently racist. His argument was that DEI programs constitute reverse racism against white people, particularly white men, who he believes are being unfairly disadvantaged in favor of less qualified minorities. Protesters and critics labeled Ackman a bully and accused him of racism, arguing that his targeting of Claudine Gay was racially motivated. Harvard professors came to Gay's defense, with some suggesting that Ackman was implying Gay was hired primarily because of her race, rather than her qualifications, which they characterized as a racist assumption. After all, Gay was a tenured professor, an accomplished scholar, and had risen through Harvard's ranks, yet Ackman's rhetoric seemed to reduce her appointment appointment to a checkbox exercise. In his writings and public statements, Ackman has argued that DEI ideology promotes what he sees as absurd conclusions. He wrote that under DEI's framework, capitalism is racist, advanced placement exams are racist, IQ tests are racist, essentially arguing that DEI advocates see racism everywhere, and that this worldview is itself discriminatory against white people and destructive to meritocracy. In 2024, Ackman was confronted at a conference about his DEI criticisms, where he reiterated his views about reverse racism and doubled down on his position. He's framed his opposition to DEI not as racism, but as fighting for fairness, meritocracy, and against anti-Semitism. He's also found allies in this fight, most notably Elon Musk, who has similarly railed against DEI programs. Unlike Ackman's intellectual opposition to DEI programs, our next billionaire's alleged racism emerged through crude comments made behind closed diplomatic doors. Woody Johnson. In 2020, the State Department launched an investigation into Johnson following reports that he had made multiple racist and sexist comments to his staff during his time as ambassador. The allegations were serious and specific, painting a picture of someone who held deeply prejudiced views about black people. According to the reports, Johnson made sweeping generalizations about black men, claiming they don't stay with their families, a harmful stereotype that has been used for decades to denigrate black families and black men in particular. He allegedly questioned the value of attending Black History Month events at the embassy, asking staff whether the audience would be a whole bunch of black people, as if the racial composition of attendees was something negative or something to be avoided. These weren't just allegedly off-color jokes or awkward comments, they were described as part of a pattern of insensitive remarks about race and gender that created a hostile environment for staff members. The watchdog probe that investigated these allegations was eventually closed in 2021 without further action, but the fact that the investigation happened at all and that career diplomats were sufficiently concerned to report their own ambassador speaks to the gravity of what they witnessed. Johnson, for his part, denied everything. He called the media reports false and maintained that he never made the comments attributed to him. But the allegations didn't disappear, and they raised important questions about who represents America abroad and what kind of behavior is acceptable from someone in such a sensitive diplomatic position. The Fritz Pollard Alliance, an organization that promotes diversity in the NFL, expressed that they were troubled by the allegations. This is particularly significant given that Johnson owns an NFL team, a league where the majority of players are, yet the ownership ranks remain overwhelmingly white. While Johnson's alleged remarks were reportedly made in private settings, our next billionaire's racism accusations involve far more explicit and violent behavior. Don Ahern. Now we come to Don Ahern, a name that might not be familiar to many people outside of Las Vegas or the equipment rental industry, but whose alleged racist behavior is among the most shocking and explicit on this list. Ahern built his fortune through Ahern Rentals, one of the largest equipment rental companies in the United States. He's also known as a prominent Republican donor and has hosted fundraisers for Donald Trump. But beneath that successful business facade, lawsuits and depositions have revealed deeply disturbing allegations. A 2024 lawsuit alleged that Ahern frequently used the N-word and implemented explicit discriminatory hiring policies. According to the complaint, Ahern stated, "We don't like hiring N.S. They are dumb," and actively worked to prevent the hiring of black people, Mexicans, and women at his company. These aren't vague allegations about unconscious bias or structural discrimination. These are claims of overt, explicit racism, expressed in the most offensive language imaginable. But it gets even worse. Witnesses reported that Ahern pulled a gun on a black truck driver while using racial slurs, an allegation that combines racism with threats of violence in a way that is absolutely terrifying. Imagine being that truck driver, just trying to do your job, and suddenly facing the barrel of a gun wielded by a billionaire, hurling racial epithets at you. The psychological trauma of such an experience would be immense. These allegations were serious enough that Reverend Al Sharpton, one of America's most prominent civil rights leaders, called for a Nevada Attorney General investigation in 2024, citing an alarming pattern of racism and violence. When someone of Sharpton's stature and experience, someone who has been fighting racism for decades, describes a pattern as alarming, you know the situation is severe. Ahern's own general counsel testified in 2024 that he had used racist language and objected to working with black individuals. This is particularly damning because it's not coming from an accuser or a plaintiff. It's coming from Ahern's own lawyer, someone who worked closely with him and had direct knowledge of his behavior and statements. When your own legal counsel is testifying about about your racist language, that's a pretty clear indication that the problem is real. The lawsuits also alleged broader patterns of discrimination at Ahern Rentals, including sexism and age discrimination, suggesting that the company culture was hostile to multiple groups of people. And all of this was happening while Ahern was being embraced by Republican political figures and hosting high-dollar fundraisers. Whereas Ahern allegedly expressed his racism through violent threats and hiring discrimination, our next billionaire embedded his prejudice into his company's very identity. Chip Wilson. Chip Wilson founded Lululemon, the athletic apparel company that has become synonymous with expensive yoga pants and a certain aspirational lifestyle. Wilson built a multi-billion-dollar empire by tapping into the wellness and fitness market, but his success has been tarnished by a series of statements and actions that critics have characterized as racist, particularly anti-Asian racism, along with body shaming and exclusionary attitudes. The story that perhaps best exemplifies Wilson's problematic views dates back to 2004, when he admitted that he chose the name Lululemon, specifically because he thought it was funny to watch Japanese people try to say it. Think about that for a moment. He deliberately chose a name with multiple L's, a sound that can be challenging for native Japanese speakers due to the phonetic structure of their language because he found their pronunciation attempts amusing. That's not just insensitive, it's deliberately mocking an entire group of people based on linguistic differences related to their ethnicity. Wilson has also made exclusionary comments about which customers are right for his brand, often implying that certain body types, which critics note are frequently linked to racial stereotypes, simply don't fit Lululemon's image. These comments have led to allegations of both fatphobia and racial profiling in Lululemon stores, with black women reporting that they've experienced discrimination and suspicion when shopping there, leading to boycott calls. In 2024, Wilson publicly bashed Lululemon's DEI efforts, prompting renewed calls for boycotts and leading DEI experts to urge the company to distance itself even further from its founder. Wilson's opposition to diversity and inclusion initiatives at the company he created echoes the criticisms we heard from Bill Ackman, suggesting a pattern among some wealthy business figures of viewing efforts to address discrimination as themselves problematic. The company has also faced its own racism scandals that, while not directly Wilson's fault, since he was no longer leading the company, reflect the culture he established. In 2020, a Lululemon employee promoted a bat-fried rice t-shirt, a design seen as mocking Asian stereotypes, and particularly offensive given that it came during a period of rising anti-Asian violence connected to COVID-19 pandemic racism. The incident prompted outrage and questions about what kind of workplace culture would allow such a product to be created and promoted. Lululemon has apologized for various incidents and has worked to distance itself from Wilson, who stepped down as CEO in 2015. But the brand continues to grapple with his legacy and with ongoing criticisms about exclusivity, body shaming, and racism. While Wilson's racism targeted Asian communities through mockery and exclusion, our next billionaire's documented use of racial slurs was captured on audio for the world to hear. John Schnatter. John Schnatter, the founder of Papa John's pizza chain, provides perhaps one of the clearest cases of documented racist language from a billionaire, because his use of the N-word was not just alleged, it was confirmed by audio recordings and his own admissions, even as he tried to justify the context. Schnatter resigned as chairman of Papa John's in 2018 after it was revealed that he used the N-word during a conference call, supposedly while discussing how to handle public relations issues related to racism. His explanation was that he was trying to convey that he wanted to stop using such language and was making a comparison to Colonel Sanders, claiming Sanders had used the slur without facing similar consequences, a claim that Sanders' family denied. But here's the thing: even if we accept Schnatter's explanation that he was trying to argue against racism, the fact remains that he said the word in a professional setting on a conference call with people who worked for or with his company. Audio of the call was later released in 2021, confirming the remark, though Schnatter continued to insist it wasn't racist in context and that he was trying to get rid of this N-word from his vocabulary. The 2018 resignation came after an earlier controversy that had already cost Schnatter his CEO position. He had blamed declining Papa John's sales on NFL players' anthem protests against racial injustice, essentially suggesting that black players exercising their First Amendment rights to protest police brutality were hurting his pizza business. The comments were widely criticized as tone-deaf and racially insensitive, and they led to the company removing Schnatter from his CEO role, though he remained chairman briefly before the N-word scandal. After his full departure from the company, Schnatter didn't go quietly. He faced additional allegations, including sexual harassment claims. He also claimed he was set up by Papa John's and warned of a coming day of reckoning, positioning himself as a victim rather than someone who had damaged his own company through his words and actions. Institutions responded to the scandal by removing Schnatter's name from buildings, including Ball State University in 2018, which had previously honored him as a donor and alumnus. Since leaving the company, Schnatter has cashed out over $500 million in stock and has been publicly critical of the company's direction without his leadership. Unlike Schnatter, who at least claimed his slur was said in the context of discussing racism, our next billionaire's racist statements were caught on tape with no justification whatsoever. Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling's case is perhaps the most high-profile racism scandal in professional sports history, and it resulted in the most severe punishment the NBA had ever handed down to an owner. Sterling, a billionaire real estate developer, owned the Los Angeles Clippers for over 3 decades before secret recordings of his racist statements led to his forced exit from the league. In 2014, audio recordings surfaced of Sterling telling his girlfriend not to bring black people to Clippers games and not to post photos with them on social media. In the recordings, Sterling said, "It bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you're associating with black people." Think about the absurdity and the racism of that statement, especially coming from someone who owned a team where the vast majority of players were black and whose success and wealth came directly from those players' talents. The recordings were exposed by TMZ during the NBA playoffs, creating an instant national scandal. Players across the league protested, with the Clippers themselves staging a silent protest before a playoff game, wearing their warm-up shirts inside out to hide the team logo. It was a moment that showed the power of athletes to stand up against racism, even when it came from the person who signed their paychecks. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver acted swiftly, banning Sterling for life from the NBA and fining him $2.5 million, the maximum fine allowed under league rules. It was an unprecedented move that sent a clear message. Racism would not be tolerated at the highest levels of professional basketball. Sterling initially fought the ban, but eventually he was forced to sell the team, which went for $2 billion, to former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. But here's what makes Sterling's story even more disturbing. The 2014 recordings weren't his first encounter with allegations of racism. Sterling had a documented history of housing discrimination, facing federal lawsuits for refusing to rent to black and Latino tenants. These weren't recent cases, they stretched back years, showing a pattern of discriminatory behavior that predated his public downfall. The NBA and fellow owners had essentially looked the other way for decades, as long as Sterling kept his racism private and the team kept making money. While Sterling faced consequences through a lifetime ban and forced sale, our next billionaire refused to condemn her father's genocidal statements, triggering an international sports controversy. Gina Rinehart. Gina Rinehart is Australia's richest person, a mining heiress who inherited and expanded her father's iron ore empire into one of the largest fortunes in the world. But her vast wealth has been overshadowed by controversy over her refusal to distance herself from her father's explicitly racist statements about Indigenous Australians, leading to a major scandal in Australian sports. In 2022, Rinehart withdrew a $15 million sponsorship from the Australian national netball team after Indigenous player Donald Wallum objected to wearing her company, Hancock, Prospecting's logo. Wallam's objection stemmed from statements made by Rinehart's father, Lang Hancock, who in a notorious 1984 television interview suggested that Indigenous Australians should be sterilised by doping the water supply. Let that sink in for a moment. Hancock didn't just express prejudice, he advocated for genocide, for the forced sterilisation of an entire group of people based on their race. These comments are on film. There's no disputing what he said. And when given the opportunity to condemn her father's horrific statements, Rinehart refused, instead calling the backlash virtue signalling and withdrawing her financial support. The incident sparked a major racism controversy in Australian sports and exposed deeper tensions over Indigenous representation. Former netball board members came forward to report experiencing racism within the sport, suggesting that Wallam's concerns were part of a larger pattern. The controversy also revealed deep divisions in Australian society over how to reckon with historical and ongoing racism against Indigenous peoples. Critics, including ABC television presenter Tony Armstrong, called for Rinehart to apologise. Armstrong himself faced racist abuse after publicly condemning Rinehart, showing how discussions of racism can trigger more racism from those who don't want to confront it. Rinehart's refusal to distance herself from racist family history contrasts sharply with our next billionaire's very public televised racist outburst that nearly sparked a diplomatic crisis. Clive Palmer. Clive Palmer is another Australian mining billionaire, and his case involves a racist rant that was broadcast on national television and nearly triggered a diplomatic incident between Australia and China. Palmer made his fortune in mining and real estate before entering politics, and he's known for bombastic, controversial statements. But his 2014 comments crossed a clear line into racism. During a televised program, Palmer referred to Chinese government officials as bastards and mongrels who shoot their own people in a rant about a business dispute. The comments were broadcast nationally in Australia and immediately sparked outrage, not just because they were crude and offensive, but because they promoted harmful stereotypes about Chinese people and could damage Australia-China relations, which were crucial to Australia's economy, given China's role as a major trading partner. Chinese state media and officials condemned the comments as racist and intolerable, and the Australian government had to manage the diplomatic fallout. Palmer eventually apologised for the remarks, but the damage was done. The incident revealed the potential international consequences when billionaires with political platforms make racist statements, but this wasn't Palmer's only controversial statement involving race. In 2009, he called the Foreign Investment Review Board racist for how it was handling Chinese investment proposals in Australia, an accusation that many saw as cynically throwing around serious charges for his own business benefit. Palmer has faced various unrelated legal issues over the years, including fraud charges, and his political career has been marked by controversy. Unlike Palmer's explosive on-air rant, our final billionaire's alleged racism operates more systemically through the media empire he controls and the narratives it shapes. Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch built his fortune by acquiring and expanding media properties, from newspapers to television networks, and his influence on political discourse, particularly in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, cannot be overstated. While Murdoch's case is somewhat different from the others on this list, his alleged racism comes more through the platforms he controls than direct personal statements. The evidence of racial problems within his media empire is substantial. In 2009, Murdoch apologized for a New York Post cartoon that depicted a chimpanzee representing Barack Obama, which was widely denounced as racist, given the long, ugly history of comparing black people to apes and monkeys as a form of dehumanization. The apology came after significant public outcry, but many critics felt it didn't go far enough in addressing the editorial culture that allowed such a cartoon to be published in the first place. In 2015, Murdoch himself tweeted questioning whether Barack Obama was a real black president, a comment that echoed racist birther conspiracy theories and suggested that Obama's biracial background somehow made his blackness questionable. The tweet sparked immediate backlash, and Murdoch eventually apologized. But again, the question arose, what did it say about his views that he thought this was an appropriate thing to post publicly? The problems extended beyond Murdoch's personal statements to the culture within his media companies. A former executive quit Fox News in 2017 over what they described as anti-Muslim rhetoric and problematic coverage of immigrants and race issues, suggesting that editorial decisions were being made that promoted racial and religious prejudice. In 2009, a New York Post editor filed a lawsuit alleging a litany of racist and sexist behavior at the paper, a claim that pointed to systemic problems rather than isolated incidents. In 2017, 16 Fox News employees alleged racial discrimination in legal filings, describing a work environment where people of color face barriers to advancement and were subjected to stereotyping and different standards than their white colleagues. These weren't just complaints about individual bad actors. They were allegations about the culture of one of America's most influential news organizations. Critics have long accused Murdoch's media outlets of amplifying racism in more subtle ways as well, such as through news coverage that promotes racial stereotypes, gives disproportionate airtime to anti-immigration voices, or platforms conspiracy theories like Trump's birther claims about Obama. The argument is that even when Murdoch's outlets aren't explicitly using racial slurs, they're shaping public discourse in ways that normalize racist attitudes and policies. Murdoch has personally apologized for some specific incidents, but has generally defended his companies, arguing that they represent diverse viewpoints and that individual controversies don't reflect the organization's values. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.